Good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar on the aviation sector here. Good to virtually be able to meet with people and walk you through some of the tools that we have available. My name is Greg Spitzer, so I'm with Touch of Life Technologies, and we make the aviation sector software. And the aviation sector software is a platform built on the visible human data. So it's real anatomy, not animated or modeled, based on real cross sections through a real body. So in the upper left-hand corner here, you'll see one of those cross sections, and those were taken every millimeter from head to foot. And we can reconstruct other planes and three-dimensional models that you see in the middle and interact with those from that data. So everything that your students are interacting with here is a real human and a real cadaveric experience. On the right side, which is where we'll spend most of our time today, is the lesson area of the software. And that's where you can use content that we provide. You can build your own content, integrate it into various web-based platforms you might have, like learning management systems, Google Sites, etc. But it's how you can guide the student through the anatomy that they have access to. So aside from the aviation sector software, the aviation sector is really part of a full platform of tools. We'll focus on the software today because of our current environment, hence the reason we're doing this webinar. And that's available on laptops, Mac and Windows devices, iOS, iPad devices, and students can obviously use that at home. You can use that in labs when you return to those, etc. There's also the Sectra Table platform, which is a large multi-touch device where you can interact with this similar anatomy and body in a multi-touch group environment. So a lot more collaborative, great for in-lab work and communication. It also includes the Sectra imaging platform, so you can take advantage of clinical cases and pathologies and integrate those in with the quote-unquote normal anatomy that's available in the aviation sector software. So it's a great way to kind of take this platform when you're able to and work in small groups and collaborate together on that anatomy. Moving on kind of from that is virtual and augmented reality, which is fairly new. And this is where you can put on a headset and experience the anatomy in a much different way than you can on these other devices. You can really get a great feel for structural relationships and how those fit together, and just explore the anatomy in ways that are just very unique to those environments and really give you a totally different understanding of structural relationships. The important thing here is that these are all a single platform. And so what you see today demonstrated in software, lesson content, etc., that's available on these other platforms too. So for example, if you built out a set of lessons for students to use at home on their laptops today, when you return to an on-premise course, or you maybe add VR into remote learning, those same lessons would be accessible and adaptable within those platforms. And so it all works together in a very fluid way to be a total learning solution for anatomy and a virtual cadaveric experience. So getting on with that, we'll cover a couple quick notes on the webinar. As you notice, we've just gotten going because we have a short time here. Your webinar experience today, we're going to keep everybody on mute because of the limited time, but there is a questions panel, so feel free to add questions there. We'll either respond to them at the end if we have time, or we'll also get back to you by email that you registered with shortly after the conference. You also will want to potentially minimize any of these views. So the web interface on the left, there's an X, desktop interface, there's an orange arrow, just to have them out of the way so that you can see the full screen. We noticed before that sometimes people's screens get cut off and they don't see all the lesson content, for example. So with that taken care of, let's go on to the software itself. So I'm going to introduce Laura Winkle. She's our head of customer success, and she's going to take you through various features of the aviation sector software today.
Thanks so much, Greg, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. As Greg mentioned, my name is Laura Winkle, and I head up the customer success team for Touch of Life Technologies. So today I'm just going to be showing you various aspects of the VH Dissector software. Right now we can see the 3D model pulled up in our 3D model panel, and we can just begin exploring this anatomy, rotating the 3D cadaver, moving him around in the panel, and then start exploring anatomy here in the software. So we can start dissecting and removing structures, beginning to appreciate the contents of the abdomen. Continuing on in that exploration, we can start revealing structures deep to those GI organs. And now we can enable our highlight tool and continue that exploration, but see highlighting applied to the anatomy as we explore it. As we're learning anatomy in the 3D body, oftentimes we're going to start looking at it cross-sectionally as well. So with the VH Dissector software, we have this nice ability to add in the cross-sections and bring the 3D and the 2D anatomy together. So as students learning anatomy, they have this nice opportunity to work with it and start understanding the structural relationships in front of them. As Greg mentioned, the data set over here is based on the Visible Human Project, and so we have millimeter digital images to the human body. And all of the anatomy that you're working with in that, on the 3D cadaver is completely based off of the anatomy visualized in these cross-sectional imaging. So again, students have this nice opportunity to work with real anatomy on a virtual cadaver, dissecting, highlighting, viewing these structures both cross-sectionally and in 3D. We can also work with the cross-sections, not just adding them onto the 3D anatomy, but we can build up from them. So again, using our dissector highlight tools, we can study different regions of the body, adding in structures from these cross-sections, highlighting structures, removing them, and just overall building up our understanding of these different structural relationships as it relates to, regions of the body. Now, we've looked at those elements of the software that allow us to engage with the anatomy, just kind of, doing exploration. But here in this third component of the software, this lessons panel, there are a variety of different online lessons that are great for using the software right out of the box. And as Greg mentioned at the beginning of the session, the content that you're working with in the software is available on multiple devices. So again, the cross-sectional imaging, the 3D modeled anatomy, and these online lessons here in this lessons panel are going to be available on students' devices, on instructors' devices, on iPads, the Spectra table, and pretty much through every experience in using the VH Dissector software. When we look at these different online lessons, we can break them into three categories. We've got lessons that are geared towards students in an undergraduate anatomy and physiology course. We've got modules that are designed to supplement a graduate medical anatomy experience. And then we've got clinically oriented modules that really help students take the anatomy and place it into the context of different clinical and surgical procedures. All of these lessons correlate to the 3D and cross-sectional anatomy in the Visible Human Dissector software. So starting with one of the undergraduate-oriented lessons, Anatomy Pathways, what we have here is really an anatomy text within the VH Dissector software. This particular lesson is organized systemically. And so coming into a particular module, we can start working with, in this instance, bony anatomy of the upper appendicular skeleton. Throughout the different online lessons in the software, there are red linked text that correlates the lesson content to the 3D and cross-sectional views in the software. So as a learner, I can click on these different red links to see correlated 3D anatomy. Also within the anatomy pathways, there are nice bony module lessons. So as students are studying different bones in different regions of the body, they can also bring in those different bony landmarks and surface features. And all the while, we can continue to interact with the 3D and cross-sectional anatomy that comes up when we click on those different red links, adjusting its position, zooming in, using our dissect and highlight tools to study this anatomy in 3D as well as in this nice lesson. The anatomy pathways lessons are also nicely rounded out by self-assessment, self-labeling exercises. So once students have worked through a given module, they can come in and review those different structures that they worked with within the module. Taking a look at just one other lesson here, we have, again, that systemic organization. And within this particular module, we have some nice cadaveric dissection images integrated as well. So again, as students are working with the 3D modeled anatomy and these digital images throughout the human body, they have a nice reference back to cadaveric tissue. And these images have been labeled. Coming back to our main lessons homepage and jumping now into one of the modules designed to supplement a cadaver anatomy or medical gross anatomy course, we have the cadaver dissection guide. And this particular lesson is a lot more than just a dissection guide. So this lesson is organized regionally, and for each region you have dissection steps, but you also have a series of other lessons to work with. So bony anatomy modules, surface anatomy modules, and importantly, we also have these nice quizzes. So jumping into the quizzes for the thorax or trunk region, what you're going to be working with in each of those quiz sections are high-resolution images from prosected cadavers, both dissected views and, in some instances, viscera that's been extracted. For any of these images that we have here in our panel, we can click on them. We have a nice zoom feature that allows us to zoom in and out to high magnification. And then for any image that we select here, we're going to see red pins dropped and tagged in structures. And we can hover our cursor or click on those red pins to see labeling. So under normal circumstances, the quizzes can work like flashcards for students in a cadaver dissection course, allowing them to review cadaveric anatomy, do structure identification from the comforts of their homes and outside of the cadaver lab. But in the current climate, these are really nice resources to overall offer students a nice experience and exposure to cadaveric tissue so that they can begin to appreciate how structures appear and how to, build up that understanding of what nerves, arteries, and veins look like with respect to one another. Coming back again to our main lessons homepage and jumping into that next category of lessons, we have the radiology library. And in the radiology library, you have access to ultrasound, radiograph, CT, and MR images. These are all static images. They're normal anatomy. And so for any of these radiology images, we can click on them. We'll see a static radiological image here in the lessons panel, a list of structures that we can identify in that medical imaging, and then a correlated 3D and cross-sectional view. So as a student, I can start beginning to understand how to identify anatomy in different medical imaging modalities through these labeled images. And I can tie it back into my experience and engagement with the 3D and cross-sectional anatomy here in the cross-sections and 3D model panel. Taking a look at the ultrasound images, in that same way that we saw the highlighting applied to the MRI, we can see highlighting applied here. And working with the ultrasound images is also nice. We have a nice scout image here indicating where on the body the transducer has been placed. We can then add in a cross-section to our 3D model. And again, just begin to really build up that understanding of these different structural relationships and how anatomy is going to present in these different medical imaging modalities. Now, as we look through this lessons panel and the different online lessons available to you to begin using as you start to get comfortable with the VH Dissector software, the important thing to keep in mind is that this lessons panel really makes the VH Dissector a scalable solution. So here we have a variety of different institutions that Touch of Life Technologies works with. And what these institutions have done is leverage this lessons panel space to create custom content so that students using the VH Dissector on their personal devices or institutional devices, they can really have customized lessons that correlate with their curriculum. So overall, this lessons panel is a web page, and that's what allows you to create these custom modules. Looking at an example of lessons designed completely within the VH Dissector software, we have some modules for the colleges of Southern Maryland. And what they've done here is, using the bookmarks feature of the VH dissector, they've created a collection of different views, created correlated cross-sectional views as well, and then provided students with objectives that tie into their syllabus and course curriculum. So students can come and access these modules on their own personal devices, working with the 3D modeled and cross-sectional anatomy, highlighting structures, dissecting structures, and overall accomplishing those particular objectives of those modules. Now, looking at a slightly different approach, and one completed through a third-party platform, specifically Google Sites, we have University of Cambridge's VH dissector lessons. And so, using Google Sites, they have created lessons that students at their institution can come to and work with in the lab classroom, and now on their own personal devices. So again, using the bookmarks feature of the VH dissector, Cambridge has linked their lessons to the 3D and cross-sectional content. They've also utilized the rich text field components of Google Sites that allows them to bring in additional reference images to overall enhance that resource. And finally, taking a look at an advanced approach to custom lessons, we have UNLV School of Medicine. This curriculum was built up to offer a completely virtual anatomy course. And so, using the VH dissector as a pro section, what Dr. Fall and his team of teaching, or his teaching team at UNLV School of Medicine did, was put together a whole interactive set of modules that students could come in and work with at the sector table. And so again, using the bookmarks feature of the software, they've gone ahead and created these custom views that students can then interact with. They've integrated a variety of different questions into the modules and asked the students again to just use these highlight and dissect tools on both the cross sections and 3D models to do that kind of anatomy exploration. And then lastly, we can take a look at other examples of custom lesson content using different learning management platforms. So for example, Baylor University has linked this to their learning management platform, and students can come in and, similar to what we saw with UNLV School of Medicine, work with these interactive modules correlated to the VH dissector views. So at this point, we'd like to open it up to questions, if there are any. Please go ahead and use that messaging feature.
Yeah, so one question that I did get was based on cost of student licenses and faculty licenses. And that is a bit dependent on your program, one semester NP type course versus a 4-year medical course. But we do site licensing based on students and number of students. So you can get in touch with us for that. And it's very reasonable, anywhere from $30, $35 a semester to $70, $80, $90 for 4 years of medical school. So get in touch with us on your specifics there, and we'd be happy to answer that. Another question I have, Laura, is how long, basically kind of how long does it take to get up and running with the software and using it with a course?
So definitely, you can quickly get up and running using the software with these different online lessons. These are great to kind of plug in as pre-learning and post-learning exercises, but definitely good for students' self-directed work in the software. And then overall, just beginning to work with these, building up custom content and becoming familiar with it as an instructor and a student, you'd be working closely with me. So heading up the customer success team, I just work with instructors at different institutions to offer training, both in person when appropriate, as well as virtual trainings We also have a variety of different user resources that will be provided to you. And overall, there's a lot of opportunity to just get up and running quickly, really based on how you envision using the software for your course and for students' use as well.
Another question that I have about a free trial period. We don't have one on our website, but certainly for any faculty that are interested, just get in touch with us, or we'll follow up with you specifically that asked that question after the call here, and we'll get you access to that. So yes, is the answer. Another question about images and use of images, and can these images be used or exported in a way that they can be used in other platforms? And the answer to that is yes, any of these cross-sectional or 3D images. There is a command right up at the top for saving those images as PNGs and JPEGs. Oftentimes, faculty will do that for creating test modules or integrating them into the PowerPoints that they might have already. And so yes, we fully support that, and you can certainly use those images within your teaching for anything you'd like. Obviously, if you're going to produce any commercial products, you need to contact us. I have a question about student usage on different devices, iPad, cell, Chromebook. We do support iPads starting in June. Cell phones, we don't. The iOS version, I suppose, could be made to work on a cell phone, but largely the screen size is fairly limiting, and so we haven't addressed that yet. And Chromebooks are not yet supported. A question about Carolina Biological. They showed us the VH Doctor software in their earlier webinar. That is our product, and we work with them distribution-wise. So if you get the product through them, you're going to get the same content and feature set here, and we're also there to support you. So it's not like buying it through a different avenue. It was going to get you less support or assistance. So it is the same content, same product. So there's a question here on grading assignments that students might send to import into Canvas. So one of the unique ways of how we've structured things is that we essentially are using various URL links to integrate our software. So we don't actually have to interface or store grades ourselves. So for example, Dr. Fall that Laura mentioned earlier at Albany Medical Center in New York, he uses Sakai, and he can ask the questions of students or have them do assignments directly within that Sakai platform. They can still do all the anatomical visualization in our software, but all of the questions, answers, grading, etc., all stays within that platform. So there isn't any importing or interfacing that has to be done. You just use our stuff, our product for the anatomy, and you use that platform for storing, grading, and doing what it's good for. So, but certainly, follow up with us, or we can follow up with you afterwards to give you some concrete examples of that and how that works, and show you how it works. Another kind of question about licensing is just, it also goes back to the pricing, instructor, student licensing and pricing. And essentially with the site license, once your students have access to the software, your instructors also get access to the software. And so you don't need to tally up, how many people are going to potentially interact with students. They'll all have access, and it'll be part of what they do. Question about lessons. So Laura showed a variety of lessons. Well, the question was specifically what lessons come with the system and are available with it. So Laura showed a few different types of lessons. The ones that had schools names on them. So for example, College of Southern Maryland, Baylor, etc. You would not have access to those unless, of course, you reach out to those universities and ask them to be able to utilize those resources. The lessons that she showed in the beginning, anatomy pathways, the cadaver dissection guide, those are all are part of the core platform. So they're not an additional cost. They are come to you with the software, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see. Tom asked, how well does the software work on smart devices like iPads? Quite well. I've been very impressed with the performance on iPads, and it looks great on all the iPad Pro models and some of the more recent iPads. You can certainly get in touch with us for a specific list of hardware that's required, but any really recent iPad, it performs impressively well on. I see just a bony pelvis now. Okay, Laura, I've got a question here about a bony pelvis. And can we see one, just the bony pelvis, and see how you can rotate it and explore it?
Yep, sure thing. So with the anatomy tool, you have a nice way to quickly build up and even dissect down specific models within the VH dissector. So right now I'm just using the systems organization or the systems list of the anatomy tool to add in those skeletal elements. I can adjust the axis of rotation so that it's set to be for the pelvis. And let me go ahead and zoom in a bit. And I'm going to go ahead and hide the cross sections view for right now while I'm working with that bony pelvis. I can also add in cross sections like we saw earlier in the session. So definitely as we're kind of studying contents of the pelvis, it's nice to be able to add in those cross-sectional views and then bring in anatomy. So for example, as we're studying those spaces of the pelvis, we can add in the bony elements, have that tied to our cross-sectional view, and then also continue to add in pelvic viscera. And for the female data set, I'll go ahead and come back to this anatomy tool, select the female icon to switch over to that data set, and then using the same steps as before, I can add in just the bony pelvis.
Another question I'll have you, or I'll address while you're doing this is, could I be doing this on my own computer and having students follow along in a Zoom meeting or recording with Panopto? Yeah, you certainly can use it with Zoom and have the students follow along, and a lot of people do that. In fact, some people have even started using the VR system that way, or the table in current situations where they can't access the table or have students access the table during these times. But yeah, definitely you can broadcast things in that way and have students access them. A question about tags on bony landmarks of the pelvis. No, those aren't there in the three-dimensional model right now. There's a whole series within the cadaver dissection guide that covers bony landmarks and bony anatomy, and those will be further integrated into the three-dimensional anatomy going forward, but they aren't there at this time. One important thing to note is oftentimes those bony landmarks are landmarks because of structures attaching tendons, etc. And so in those cases, oftentimes, while we might have a dried bone specimen here with various structures highlighted, we'll add in the actual structural anatomy that relates to those, a notch, a groove, things passing through them, etc. So that students get not just here's the landmark, but this is why the landmark exists. But absolutely adding some of that in. Question about just going back to the lessons page real quick, the home page, and just as I mentioned, what lessons would be available. So scrolling down to online lessons here, there's basically 3 different levels of anatomy, if you will. Online A&P, community college level course with anatomy pathways, where it's a virtual lab guide. Virtual Edge is kind of in the middle. It's a pro section based course. Cadaver dissection guide is a full dissection course and curriculum for that. So those are the kind of the core anatomy components. And I'm talking fairly fast here to get through things as our time runs out. The radiology library is for clinical imaging and reference. Muscle tables is essentially innervation, blood supply, etc. There's some clinical skills modules relating to nursing simulation courses and also procedural anatomy within medical school. And finally, the surface palpation guide for physical therapy students, or really anybody palpating structures of the body, that has a full collection of videos and information about palpating structures within the body. So those are all the core pieces, and we'd be happy, like I said, to get you a demonstration where you can walk through those individually.
Okay.
And I think with that, I don't think I missed anything. But yeah, I think we're out of time here. So we'll go ahead and end in the interest of the next presenter for HAPS that needs to have people going over there. But we'll be sure to follow up with everybody that did ask questions and be in touch. Thank you for taking time to join us from home or wherever you might be.